Welcome back. What's good, homies? Welcome to the Drafts and Draughts podcast. I'm Joe, a.k.a. Sultan. This is Dave, a.k.a. Disaster. He's back. It's Monday, June 3rd, and today we're doing our top 15 to 20-ish of our Dynasty wide receiver rankings. But before we do, we're going to jump right into our draft review. Dave, but before we do that, Dave, welcome back. All's good. Keep it brief, but how you doing?
We're doing great. Made it to the tornado. It's my youngest son turned 1 yesterday, so I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old now.
Happy birthday.
So yeah, it was just a busy week, and so with daycare closed, being stay-at-home parent plus trying to work, plus a few other things I got going on, it was just a long week. I was exhausted. I think my wife was too. So let's get in it, dude.
Yeah,
I have
let's hear it.
I've talked before about Galaxy being my favorite hop. So I have a tree house here called Galaxy Many Ways. Part 1, Tasmania. So I'm expecting this to be a banger. It is a little old for a tree house. It's almost 2 months old. So we'll see. What you got?
You gotta love tree houses. Well, give us a live crack. Oh, I love that. Gotta love some crack. I've got this is the only beer left in my fridge that I haven't had on the show yet. So I didn't really want to have this on a Monday night, but I'm having the Greater Good Greylock Imperial New England IPA. It is a 12% alcohol can. I'm gonna be actually fucking trashed by the end of this. I've never had it. I'm looking forward to trying it. I wish I had. I'll have other than
unless it sucks. Unless it sucks, you might just not end up drinking it. just dupe it, crack it. If it sucks, just pour a Coors Light in the can.
Pour a silver bullet in there. But yeah, all right. Cheers, bud. Oh. What do you got? What do you got for a rating?
It's on a lot of the notes I wanted from Galaxy. It's got a little bit of I'll have to try it again once I just ate pretzels, everybody, so palate might be a little bit off here.
Nah, the salt definitely helps bring out the flavors.
Well, it's definitely a little more floral than I was expecting. I prefer my Galaxy beers to be a lot more dank, kind of almost weedy, grassy, not floral. Those are all terms.
No, it's just funny because I don't know shit about this. Fuck.
But yeah, it's just a little more floral than I was hoping for. But I'd say all around good. I'm gonna give it. I was a 4.75 at first taste, but
love it first taste.
I think I'm at a 4.5.
Okay, 4.5. I actually do. I'm gonna commission someone to go through all our episodes and make a power rankings list of all of our draft reviews. But yeah, so let me take one more sip of mine because I already forgot after your long-winded fucking explanation. Yeah, man, dude, this is phenomenal. Like, I expected this to be really bitter and beery and, all those real terms. But this is, like, super juicy. It's dry hopped for a smooth citrusy finish. The highest peak in mass. Greylock is the highest peak in mass.
I don't think you're allowed to read the
So they nailed their description because they checked all the boxes. But okay, enough beer. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I'll have to see how I handle it before I can give it a full. Because if I have one can and I'm actually tripping over my sandals, then or whatever, not my sandals. I don't know. Anyways, on to the OTP.
Already gone, dude.
I can't give it. All right, so apologize. I'm stealing this from another podcast that I heard earlier today or yesterday. But I had a tough time coming up with an OTQ today. So, but this one I think is super thought-provoking. And those of you at home listening, write in the comments who you would want to know and why. The question is, if you could know one player's stats at the end of the season this year for dynasty purposes only, not for redraft, not for the most points score, but like, who do you think, if you could know right now, crystal ball, you look into it, stare into the sun till your corneas bleed, and you say, God, please tell me this player's stats. Who are you choosing to know and why. Yeah.
God, that's interesting. So I'm gonna not just take the dynasty side. I'm gonna give you 3 quick answers. One,
Okay.
redraft. I want to know Christian McCaffrey, especially if I'm the first overall pick. If he's going to be a stud, I'm grabbing him. If he's not, I just take a wide receiver anywhere in the first 4 or 5 picks. If it's redraft, man, I would want to know. I'd say like if it's right now, I'd want to know. I think for my team, it would be Xavier Legette or Jaden Daniels because I want to know how good are they. Because if I could sell them high-ish right now, I might just do. But it's kind of a toss up there. And then
I like Daniels because it's a second order. You know how Terry did too, probably. If Jaden Daniels stinks, Terry probably also stinks.
Oh, my whole team, and as you know, my
your whole team
literally
stinks.
all command. I almost went Ben Sinnott. Like I could go Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah,
there's
true.
My whole team is Commanders. So I don't know. I think yeah. Selfishly for me, it would be some of my new rookies that I spent quality pick value on, or it would be like, yeah, I'd love to know if I can't name the name, but I would love to know the best non-rostered
like
player right now. Which is like that's
really
cool. Care about the most that I could go
right.
get.
If you find that Kyron right now,
yeah, and then I think the other answer would be for my big trade away. I'd love to know how good Christian McCaffrey and or Devonta Adams are going to be. So
yeah,
those are kind of my ones that I'd focused on for this year.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So my answer to this, I had 2 answers, but I'm going to go with the one that I think has the most dynasty impacts, downstream impacts besides just their own playing, which is Kirk Cousins. Obviously, selfishly, I'm a Drake London bag holder. So knowing if Kirk Cousins plays 17 games, throws for 4,000 yards, throws 32 touchdowns, it's going to mean a lot for Drake London, and it's going to be a lot for Kyle Pitts. It's going to be a lot for Bijan Robinson. There's so many stakeholders in the Kirk Cousins stock that it's like to know if he does well. Not only that, say he only plays 10 games and he looks like shit. That probably also means Michael Penix was a great buy in the preseason. Like if I could know right now, Kirk Cousins only makes it 8 games. Holy fuck, am I spending? I'll send a first in every league I'm in Superflex to go get Michael Penix right now. You're getting him at the 2-3 in Superflex rookie drafts right now. But again, for 1 QB purposes only, to know how Kirk Cousins does.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I didn't even think about the QB side, but that's such a good answer. I think the other person I probably would do is Rashee Rice. He's probably the most controversial one right now, which we'll actually talk about today.
Well, that's a good one too because of that wide receiver room. Like that will be spoiler
the
alert.
Room is interesting.
That's gonna be a big conversation later in this episode.
The room is interesting. His background of behavior is interesting right now. I'd also know, like, so we don't even know if he's going to be suspended this year, maybe next year.
His behavior. It's true. It's like, does he play 11 games or does he play 17? And we're like, oh shit, they pushed off the suspend. Maybe he didn't get suspended. They plea deal. Yeah. And the other one, without going into it, is also Caleb Williams for the obvious reasons of like right now he's being drafted in the first round of Superflex startups, and he has 3 wide receivers that are depending on him to be productive. 2 of which we're probably going to talk about today. Maybe not. Maybe just 1. I don't know. I can't see all the rank. But I think knowing a quarterback's outcome is the obvious low-hanging fruit for, okay, if you know the quarterback, then you know all of their ancillary support pieces that he's supposed to be there for. But I did like your mentality on the redraft side of saying, well, if I know if I'm spending my first overall pick on McCaffrey, I want to know that he did. If I had to pick one non-QB that I want to know their end of season stats, I gotta think it's for dynasty
it's gotta be
purposes.
JSN. It's gotta be for you. It should be
JSN is a really good one. I think I'm not alone because I think that also says a lot about the Seahawks room too. Like if JSN has a monster year, DK's probably not, and Blockett's probably dead. Because I don't see Geno Smith supporting 3 wide receivers. So by default, that just says if JSN goes out there and puts up a 115 reception season, which I don't see him putting up 1,500 yards just because of the role he plays. But if he go out there and command a huge target share this year and actually prove that, yeah, I'm not just a gadget player behind the line. Stop treating me like Kadarius Toney and throw me the rock in the middle of the field. I could see him having a really good role. I don't think he's ever going to be. I mean, I guess Amon-Ra St. Brown is his ceiling outcome, but we'll probably talk about. Actually, I don't know if we're going to talk about him. I don't think he's on our power rankings, but all right, that's awesome. So let's get into the episode for today to continue the continuation of the series we had been doing, which was our dynasty rank positional rankings. We've already gone through QBs and running backs. We had some really good dialogue a couple weeks ago. Now we're getting to our wide receiver rankings. So let me present.
By the way, my older kid right now, his favorite thing to do is run around and say "ta-da."
Does he do anything, or he just says "ta-da"?
Anything. He can just pop into a room. He just goes "ta-da." He can just get down and just be like "ta-da."
Daddy, watch that.
No,
Jumps in, spins in a circle.
Just does something. He doesn't even know if you're paying attention. He'll just be out another room sometimes. Just hear him say "ta-da."
Well,
so
here's our power rankings. Ta-da! Okay, well, let's get into the top tier. We were pretty much aligned. We had the exact same top four, albeit in slightly a different order. I'm going to throw them up there. There's probably not much to say, but I did have one quick question for you. But it's CeeDee Lamb is our unanimous one overall. We both had him one, followed by Justin Jefferson at 2, Jamar Chase at 3, and Marvin Harrison
back to 1.
Marvin Harrison at 4. Yeah, even if you put JJ at your 1, I guess Lamb would still average out as our consensus 1. But so these all had an average of less than 4. So making them our clear tier of elite foundational dynasty wide receiver pieces. The interesting one here, which I thought was kind of bold of me and maybe homerish of me as a Marvin Harrison owner, was putting him already in this tier ahead of guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, even like your Tyreek Hills. Like some people might say you're crazy for putting a guy in the top tier when he hasn't set foot on the field yet. And I know everyone's heard about Marvin Harrison. How much more can we possibly say? But you also did, which I thought was, spoke volumes because usually we're pretty disconnected on players.
I mean,
is there anything you want to add to this?
So, okay, I think I've said it in one of the other shows. I hate the way we're doing this partially because I'd rather just see what our rankings are and then break the tier together. Because for me, this tier ends after Amon-Ra. Personally.
That's so actually the very next tier is just Amon-Ra St. Brown, so we can actually put him in there. Because I'll pull up the rankings so we can see it actually. So let me just present our rankings. It's hard to actually come up with tier breaks because you have to actually go based on an average.
Well, I tried to. I think I put
so
here's in there 15 for mine.
Yeah, but I just had to go with. So this is how I did our average rankings. I have the column P here is Dave's rank, Joe's rank. The average consensus rank, where I tried to bucket them based on how close together they are to each other. So only a half rank apart, followed by, for Harrison, followed by a 1.5 rank for Amon-Ra, was a slight break. But then 2 full rank average away from Garrett Wilson just made Amon-Ra was clearly the 5th ranked receiver for us. Whereas there were we both had a different order for our top 4, meaning to me that was a clear tier break.
Yeah, the only reason I would say differently is because his age is.
Oh shit.
Sorry. What you're showing was his age is slightly younger than Jefferson and CeeDee. He's the same as Chase. And so for me, pairing those together, he did it last year. He was 3rd, right? And so to me, can he take another step further? Jared Goff played great. He just got a contract extension too. You have Sam Laporte who's going to come in a second year. And they're kind of figuring out their backfield, which is really strong. He's in such a prime position to still be so elite. And he's already done it once. Everyone else on that list, AJ Brown maybe should be there too, but he's just that little bit older where I'm okay with him being in the next tier. But for me, that's why I had Amon-Ra. For me, as I can see the delineation. I don't think any of those guys are necessarily straight up 1-to-1 trades, but I think is 100% in that same bucket of what those guys are valued at today. But that's just my personal view. But
I agree. I think you're right. I think if you don't own any of these players and you're trying to come get them, I think they all have roughly the same price. You're not saying, "Oh, I'd give you 3 firsts for." I would give you 3 or 4 firsts for Chase, but I'm only going to give you 2 firsts for Amon-Ra. You got to pay basically the same price.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
yes. 100%.
I think the biggest difference would be maybe just because of and I'm again regurgitating here, but because of the position Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, playing out of the slot, you just have a little bit less touchdown upside as the guys who play on the outside, like Lamb, JJ, Chase, and actually, I guess Lamb and JJ. I mean, Lamb and Chase play in the slot quite a bit too, but you just have a little bit less touchdown upside. Whereas like Harrison and JJ, they're all going to be on the field even in 3 tight end sets. Whereas I guess you could make the case that traditionally speaking, Amon-Ra St. Brown would be off the field in those cases. But I doubt it given he's so good. So I'm cool putting Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same tier as all these guys. And again, going back to one of an earlier episodes, when we put a guy in the same tier here, this just becomes a same tier preference type thing. Like if you are sitting there and you're like, oh, I would definitely have Chase at 1. Like these guys are idiots. Go ahead. To me, I would take any of these trades. I'm not trading any of these guys straight up for each other, but I would take any of them with a plus for the other one. Like if someone came to me with Marvin Harrison and said, I'll give you Marvin Harrison plus a second for CeeDee Lamb, boom, take him. Like I will take Marv plus a second for CeeDee Lamb right now. That's kind of how my logic behind these plays are all the same skill level, or they have such upside or age comparisons. Like someone might say, why would you have Marv in the same tier as these guys? If you look right here, you can see he's 20. He hasn't even turned 22 yet. He's going to have 3 full years of youth on Lamb and JJ to the point where it's like, yeah, of course you're hoping he becomes JJ, but he could be JJ, but 3 years younger if he does put up a big monster season, which I think was why I was okay putting him up here. But, all right, let's move on to our next tier. We got Garrett Wilson at 6. We have.
We can lose our left side if you want, just to view the guys on the right because it's hard to see them.
Yeah, it makes me stop sharing the whole screen altogether.
See our beautiful faces.
So I got Garrett Wilson at 6, Puka Nacua at 7. We have AJ Brown at 8.
You're not letting them be borderline elite.
Well, that's where I had Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's why I had this separate tier. So this tier is now gone.
I see what you're saying. I got you.
So Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, AJ Brown is 8. Chris Olave is 9. And Malik Neighbors is our 10th player. And so this is an interesting tier because all of these receivers are under 24 years old. Actually, Puka just turned 24. Except for AJ Brown, who just turned 27. So he's the odd man out. Maybe you want to talk about AJ Brown. Why you didn't have him higher? Was it because of the age or something else? Because I had him at 7, you had him at 9. So in this tier, there was a slightly big disconnect. But there's one other player we had a bigger disconnect on. So
yeah, I mean the AJ Brown thing is you still Devontae Smith in the wing. I don't know how good Jalen Hurts is really going to consistently be. Like I don't know the way they ended that season last season. They've lost Kelsey as their center. Like I don't know. I just more hesitant on what is actually going to happen with the Eagles. They added Saquon, so they're going to run more. Like I just don't know. I just have question marks. And so for me, AJ Brown has been great. Like he for sure belongs in this tier. You could put him at the top of the tier. I don't think I'd really argue that he shouldn't be 6. It's just that question of even with how good he is, right? Like the question that kind of lingers is how much longer is he going to be this good? And so he's had 2 seasons to warrant where he is, a third close, other ones with some injuries or some other challenges. What makes him, to jump to be the next person beyond this versus some other younger guys that like Malik Neighbors could do that in season 2 and then prove it forever. Garrett Wilson, if he actually is a competent quarterback, could kind of prove it. Same with Olave. Puka already kind of proved it in year 1. And I think if Stafford stays healthy, it's only going to continue to prove it. So all of those things there is why I had AJ Brown kind of towards the back end of this tier for me. But I wouldn't really fight you either way. I think AJ Brown's elite.
Yeah. So question here. So if you own any of these guys, and these guys are your wide receiver one, or they don't even have to be your wide receiver one, but what are you doing if you own one of these guys? Do you feel like you are like, because I feel like for Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Malik Neighbors, even though they're viewed right now in our tier 2, top 10, it's still kind of like you're putting some hopium behind. I'm hoping they can ascend maybe to this being this level, because in redraft these guys are not. Well, I guess Wilson is, but Tyreek Hill goes ahead of these guys on Underdog right now, and I don't know. I'm sure there's other guys that are closer to the top. Are you thinking like you want to use them to try to move up into the top 5 up there, or are you trying to actually tier down and capitalize on some value, saying, I love the potential of Wilson and Olave, but if I could tier down and get, Brandon Ayuk in a first for one of these guys, maybe I would do. Like, what do you think you would do if you held any of them? Because it seems
so.
Like
the interesting thing is I had a trade offer out to Matt for Jalen Waddle, and I said, okay, it's the same deal for AJ Brown, and he's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised because I was like, well, Tyreek's eventually going to be gone. Jalen Waddle is going to be then their long-term wide receiver one is what it's looking like. AJ Brown says Devontae Smith. How much longer is AJ Brown actually going to be supplanted with the Eagles? He's also quite a bit older. And so I kind of was just like, I was more surprised that he didn't take the age into consideration. That maybe it could add a little bit more, but like it at face value was kind of a fair trade either way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I don't know. If I own one of those guys, it depends on how competitive you are in Dynasty. If you're competitive right now, I don't think I'm trading one of them unless I'm getting maximum value, like you kind of said, like a Brandon Ayuk who could become one of these guys plus a first feels pretty good, especially if it's a first next year.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was like a first in 3 years, probably not worth it. I think the other interesting thing is depending on your depth, is would you trade one of them for like a Tyreek and a first, or a Devontae Adams and like another young guy, like a George Pickens and Devontae Adams, to get one of those guys? I don't know. It depends on your depth on your team. But if you needed another startable asset and flex, etc., that you need to be, top 24 wide receiver kind of position, interesting opportunities there to throw some offers out. But yeah, I think for me, I would probably be holding and trying to compete now with them. But I would say at least for Olave and Garrett Wilson, if they have a bad year this year, they're off. They drop 10 spots at least.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think the big one is like it is AJ Brown is the elephant in this room. Like he's the one of the 4 of them that I'm the most confident in putting up a wide receiver 1 season this year. I mean, I love Puka was fantastic. He's such a good story. He seems like such a nice guy. Like I'm sure he's a great guy. I want to date my daughter. But like AJ Brown is the only one out there. I mean, the big difference is like he is at his max peak value right now. So like you said, if you are thinking of selling, now is the last time, because when he has the 28 next to his name, I'm sorry, he just immediately loses a whole first of value next year, especially if he shows any signs of aging this year. If he comes out at all, gets banged up too easily, he just has a slow start, a slow finish, that's going to carry over for the whole offseason. So AJ Brown is the only one. If I was in a middle tier team, I would consider selling at his peak right now, but I'm not getting out of AJ Brown just because I'm not tearing down off AJ Brown and trying to stay competitive. I'm tearing out of AJ Brown to go get multiple picks, or going to go get Keon Coleman and a first and a second, or that might not even be enough. I don't know. Like that's the type of deal I would be doing if I'm going to tear off AJ Brown. The other 4, like Wilson and Olave, like you just said, those are the 2 that are like, I wouldn't say scare me, because I think they're both phenomenal talents, but they haven't been
scare me.
Excellent. They've just been really good, which is, again, they're in the top 10 for a reason. There's not a ton of excellent receivers out there, but they're being treated like they've already put up wide receiver 1 seasons, and they haven't. So it's kind of a weird conundrum. Granted, we have Marvin Harrison in the top 5. So again, foot and mouth, but you're right. I don't see why guys like Wilson and Olave are regarded in so much higher than some other wide receivers that are also have put up similar numbers to them, other than I guess they're Ohio State guys. So people just have hard-ons for them by default.
I would, as we go through this, tell me who you think those players are, because I don't think that there's anyone that has put up their numbers thus far, similar age range, that we don't view to that same light.
I think, well, the one guy who is now actually being inflated up there is Drake London. But prior to the Kirk Cousins signing, it was like Wilson's top 10, Olave's top 10, but London, boy, that guy stinks. And it's like, what? Like they've all put up very similar per route numbers. Just Drake London's been trapped in an offense with, Desmond Ridder throwing rocks at him and Arthur Smith, giving Jonnu Smith jet sweeps in the goal line. Like, what do you want? Like, it's not London's fault. He's been fantastic. And they're on the same draft class.
He hasn't, just looking real quick, I just checked real quick. He hasn't been in the top 30 in PPR ever.
Who? London?
Yeah. Whereas
I know
both Wilson and Olave have been, and Olave's even been better than them, like top 18.
I know.
And Wilson's like, 21 to 24. So he's been wide receiver too. So
the other ones you could make cases for are like your George Pickens, your Jordan Addison, like those guys who are also have had shoddy QB play, but have shown flashes. And yet for some reason they're regarded outside the top 20. Granted, London is now pumped up, so I can't say that anymore. But there's a lot of guys who have similar numbers that are just totally.
If there's an interesting thing, it is, if you look at just raw numbers, is how much higher London is pumped up compared to George Pickens.
Yeah.
Where George Pickens lost an asset and has a new QB, his best QB he's ever played with. And everyone is like, wow, London goes from whatever, tight end, wide receiver 20.
Well, we'll talk about London in the next tier. Is there anything you want to say about Malik Neighbors, or any questions, anything you're curious about before we move on to the next
No,
tier?
Actually, one thing I want to mention from the first tier, though, is there has never been, if there's one person where you ask the question that I would be selling right now, it's Marvin Harrison. Because there is no one that has more value right now without having done anything than Marvin Harrison. And it's not going to take much to dethrone him, I think, from the pedestal that he's on right now. Because you're expecting Kyler Murray's probably not going anywhere. McBride's not going anywhere. Michael Wilson's not going anywhere. Like, they kind of have their core on offense. I don't know what is going to change. That's going to be like, oh, it's going to get better for Marvin Harrison. Unless maybe they're like, hey, Kyler actually does suck, and we're going to get off Kyler. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I just think Harrison walks into a situation where he's probably, let's just say he has a 25% target share, which is not even elite. That's
slow. Yeah,
wide receiver. That's wide receiver one level, but not elite. Like Devontae Adams traditionally operates like a 30%. DeAndre Hopkins has been 33%. Like, Justin Jefferson, Lamb were both 29. Actually, JJ was 25 last year, but Lamb was like 30% last year. Marvin Harrison walks into a room that has vacated 200-ish targets between Zach Ertz and Rondale Moore and Hollywood Brown. So there's just, if he were to put up a 25% target share, that's 150 targets as a rookie. Pretty hard not to see him putting up 100 reception season if he stays fully healthy. So I think that's why people
But that's the thing. If he doesn't,
oh yeah,
how much does that perception like? Because that's my point, is that there's not going to be a better situation for him, at least in his probably first 2 or 3 years, than it is in this first season that we're projecting. Because if he stumbles, they maybe add a wide receiver in the draft. Like, if Mike Wilson is kind of a done, and do they do that in the second round or the first round? I don't know. So, or if he gets a new QB, is the new QB kind of figuring it out for a year? Like, so Marvin Harrison's value right now, if he's not wide
he's already at his peak
10 or better, right? His value probably drops a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit.
It's funny because, like, you're right. If your team is a complete dumpster and you have the 101 and you're like, well, I want to hold Marvin Harrison and see how he plays out. It's like, unless you're going to build around, like, obviously the game is about having fun and build your team however you want. But if you're trying to maximize value, he's already at essentially his maximum value. Like, Of course, I guess we can move him up 3 spots next year. This could be him at this time next year. That's like as much as he can go. The one counterpoint I'll make for the sake of, dialogue is look at Garrett Wilson, who's done basically nothing in 2 years. I mean, he's had good years. I don't want to say basically nothing, but he hasn't even put up a top 20 season yet. And he's wide receiver 6.
He hasn't had a good QB. Like, Marvin Harrison has a good QB.
His name value, he's insulated. He's an Ohio State guy. He was the 4th overall pick in real life. And he's so much insulation where
move on. I made my point.
It's good to have counterpoints. Okay. Nothing on Malik Neighbors or Puka. Puka's great. I'd be worried about his Matt Stafford someday retiring, but as far as this goes, I think he belongs up here.
A great chance to, if you want to value down to someone that you trust a little bit more or have a little more upside belief in. Say Malik is someone I'd actually gamble with. I think Malik has a lot of room to grow into adding more value. He's also the youngest one I think we've talked about so far. And yeah, I think Malik Neighbors is the one of this group that if they were whatever his value might cost, I'd probably be the one I'd buy the most if I could.
Yeah, I think Malik Neighbors is a freak. I'm just worried about him playing with Daniel Jones. Honestly, that sucks. Like, he's essentially going to get relegated to the same role that London's dealt with, Wilson's dealt with, Olave's dealt with, Pickens has dealt with, which is like, yeah, no matter how good you show you are, if the coach doesn't pass the ball, air it out, and the quarterback stinks, doesn't matter. But yeah, let's move on to our next tier, which I think is borderline wide receiver ones. You're confident in them, but you don't want them as your receiver one on your team, I think. So we had Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. Okay, Drake London is our 11. Jalen Waddle is our 12. Devonta Smith is our 13. We had Roma Dunze at 14. T. Higgins at 15. Brandon Ayuk at 16. Nico Collins at 17. And Tank Dell at 18. So this is a super interesting tier. This is probably the most fun tier to talk about, I think, today. Because we have a range of talent, but they're all fairly young. The oldest player in this tier is Brandon Ayuk at 26. And the youngest player in this tier is Drake London, who's turning 23 in a couple months. Actually, Roma Dunze is 22.
Drake London become 11.
Because I have him at my 9, you have him at your 15. So
pretty sus.
Yeah. I guess I'll start with Drake London because we've already kind of touched on it.
Wait, pause. We didn't have the same top 10. Who else did you have in your top 10 that isn't up there?
Who else? The only other person we had in our top 10, we both had Malik Neighbors at 10, which made him an average of 10.
Yeah, I know. So who?
I had Chris Olave at 11. You had him at 7. That was the biggest disconnect between the two of us, which maybe is an oversight.
You had Olave at 11?
Yeah.
Okay.
I felt like Olave kind of has a murky QB situation with Derek Carr. And then even if they move on from him, it's not that easy to find a new quarterback. Like, yeah, you got to hope for you're going to get the next Kirk Cousins to sign there. You just worry that he's already going to be 25 next year if they lose Derek Carr. So it's like, again, I have nothing against him. It's in my top 12. It's just my reason for not having my top 10.
I didn't realize that we had people not in the top 10 that one of us rated there. So that makes sense. That's good. Okay.
So Drake London, this is the one that, again, I don't want to spend too much time because it seems like it's homerism, but I wanted to just articulate how good Drake London has been with and it's not just a matter of he's been good on purpose. But let me pull up a graphic I put together to kind of showcase Drake London's career here. So if you're listening, this is gonna be tougher to process, but if you're watching, I have pulled up on the screen a view that is Drake London's career team pass attempts and then his player target share, which would equate to how many pure targets he's received. And then based on his QB play, I pulled what his catchable target rate was and basically backed into what his career stats have been thus far. So his team pass attempts for his career is 473.9. 472.5, I'm sorry. But let me pull up. I had another graphic I meant to pull up, which is the league average pass attempts for the last 3 seasons. The league average has been 585, 564, and 572. And Kirk Cousins-led teams have thrown over 600 pass attempts each of the last 3 seasons. So what I did in this graph is based on London's per route metrics and the baseline outcome of 530 pass attempts for his team, the median outcome of 560 targets, which is just if the Falcons are a middle of the road team, or a positive outcome where they pass it 600 times. This isn't even the best possible outcome, which would be they throw it 670 times like the Vikings did 2 years ago. These are just 3 different outcomes that could happen for Drake London this year. Based on him carrying a 27% target share for his career, if they just bump up to the very bare minimum of 530 targets, that leads to him getting about a 13 point per game season. And that's also if he maintains a 2.7% touchdown rate, which is far below the league average. The league average touchdown rate is around 7%. So what I'm trying to articulate here, it's a lot easier to see on the screen, is that of these three outcomes, 530 team pass attempts, 560 team pass attempts, and 600 team pass attempts, they could equate to roughly 13 points per game, 16 points per game, or north of 20 points per game, just based on London's efficiency. Now, as we all know, with more volume means less efficiency. So I'm not going to say, yeah, London's going to easily put up 20 points per game if they throw it 600 times. Of course, that's probably not going to be the case. That banks on him playing 17 games. That relies on him catching 10% touchdown rate. That relies on Kirk Cousins actually being as good as he has always been. But the combination of his terrible QB play and the team pass attempt average far below 500, which is the only team to average less than 500 pass attempts the last 2 years, leads me to believe that Drake London is a superstar in the making, and sleeping on him would be a travesty. So I'm sorry for coming super equipped to defend my boy.
I'm not gonna lie, this graph made me so bearish on Drake London.
Bearish?
Bearish.
Does that make means you don't like him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's so many broad assumptions, and only in the median outcome is he wide receiver 12 to 14. Like
I think
okay. So he's like, all right. Like,
right. If the Falcons pass for a league average amount of times, 560, and he doesn't have an outlier touchdown rate season, and he doesn't increase his team target share to an elite 30% level like he had his rookie season, then wild. Yeah, he averages about 16.5, 17, which is why I had him in my top 10, but not my top 5.
There's so many things you're not factoring in there too. Like Kyle Pitts actually getting an accurate share of what he should be getting in targets. Bijan Robinson playing and getting a lot of catches in that passing offense too. Like there's definitely so bearish on Drake. I'm lower on Drake London right now. I'm moving him to
man, guys. Dave's views are not a reflection 18. Of this show. Don't worry.
I'm moving him to 18.
That's fine. Obviously, the superstar crazy outcome would be he carries a 30% target rate, has a 15% touchdown rate like Jahan Dotson had a couple of years ago, or like Christian Watson had a couple of years ago, or some crazy fluky touchdown rate season where he has 23 points per game. That's probably not going to happen. That would be like a 5%, a 95th percentile outcome. But Kirk Cousins has carried multiple receivers to top finishes before, and I think as long as the pass attempts go up to at least league average, you're going to be very happy with him in your wide receiver 1 or 2 slot. So that's my case on London. Moving into the biggest disconnect we had in this tier was the two biggest ones are Devonta Smith and Tank Dell. You had Devonta at wide receiver 12. I had him at wide receiver 19. You had Tank Dell at wide receiver 11. I had him wide receiver 22, but that feels low. I think I'm actually higher on him than that what that ranking says. But for the sake of argument, let's just say I have him that low. What's pick one, Devonta or Tank Dell or both. Who do you want to talk about?
What was the Devonta Smith one? You had him what?
I had him 19th. You had him 12th.
Okay. I mean, isn't Devonta Smith like the first wide receiver to win the Heisman in a long ass time?
Yeah.
So that's 1. 2, he just got
like Frail Boys.
Well, he just also just got a big extension. So yeah, for me, it's Devonta Smith is a slightly worse version of Jalen Waddle on the current value of Dynasty, because Jalen Waddle's Tyreek is so much older than AJ Brown that like Devonta Smith and AJ are like close to the age, and I think we are really recognizing. And so my hope was that eventually, hey, okay, we're going to move on from AJ Brown and Devonta Smith's going to take over. And so that's why I'm a little bit higher, that potentially they stay on the same team, and it almost kind of becomes like last year's Zeke and Tony Pollard, where Pollard ended up starting to succeed Zeke in the same season while they're on the same team. It's kind of my hope coming for Devonta and AJ. Like, is there a point where Devonta Smith takes over that lead wide receiver role, either because AJ Brown misses a step or he gets better chemistry with Jalen Hurts? So it's a little bit of a hope there as to why I have him as high as he is. But he's also proven that he can be in this range of performance. And I think, again, like there's potential to only to kind of get better in that with the extension he has there too. Tank Dell though.
Wait, before we go on Tank Dell, I just want to say, I guess the one thing that I didn't realize, which is probably why I ranked them this way, is that you would think AJ Brown's been in the year for 6 years and Devontae Smith's been in the year for 3 years. They're probably, or 4 years, whatever. They probably have a pretty moderately sized age gap, whereas Devontae Smith is barely a year younger than AJ Brown. So it's like a weird, like, oh, when AJ Brown moves on, he'll take over. Like, he'll be what, 28? Like, you're not getting a ton of dynasty value by investing in Devontae Smith, which is kind of why I had him a little lower, which is, yeah, he's been great in Philadelphia, but he hasn't been this elite. He doesn't have the potential to me to carry a Drake London-ish level of target share. He's not going to get 25 to 30% in that offense. He's going to be relegated to
Devontae Smith's been in the league for 3 years, and he hasn't finished worse than wide receiver 29 in PPR.
Damn!
Wow.
His best years are behind him.
That doesn't really add up there.
Again, I like to look at things from a per route basis, not a fantasy PPG.
He was wide receiver 1 2 years ago. He was still wide receiver. He was wide receiver 9 2 years ago. He was wide receiver 19 last year, and kind of a down year for Jalen Hurts, where he ended the year poorly. So yeah, that's why I'm just so optimistic on him. And then Tank Dell. I mean, the only thing I really want to say about Tank Dell is, he was fantastic, even with Nico Collins there. Nico Collins had one of the greatest statistical wide receiver years ever. I was marginally disappointed they re-signed Nico, because I was kind of optimistic that they might let Nico go, they might let Diggs go, then just Tank Dell plus whatever else they add. But I think, again, Tank Dell proved how good he still could be with Nico there. Like, I'm not mad about it. I was just going to
say that. Yep.
It's really more the question of what happens with Diggs. But for me, Tank Dell, I mean, the best thing that you've heard is, one, you hear where Stroud is saying, hey, draft Tank Dell. And then two, on a podcast, they said, pick your favorite, build your perfect team. And the wide receiver he named was Tank Dell, not Nico, not Justin Jefferson. He named Tank Dell. That to me was like, that dude loves him. To me, that's a Brady Edelman bond. Like, that is just, there's something there that is just, it's so sticky, and maybe it doesn't yield fantasy forever, but like right now it did last year. And I'm so optimistic for the future.
Yeah. For context on what Dave said, CJ Stroud was asked on a podcast to build like his perfect offense. And the 3 receivers he picked were Devontae Adams at his X, Jamar Chase across the field at the Z, and then Tank Dell was in the slot. Like, what a endorsement on Tank Dell's part. So I had Tank Dell a little lower than I actually feel about him for the sake of conversation, because I know you're super bullish on Dell, and it's really hard for me to say anything bad about him. I think he's so phenomenal. So like, when I saw his profile, he's 5'8", like 150 pounds. Like, he's literally Crisco, but with long hair. Like, I'm sitting there going, this guy is going to be relegated to the slot. He's going to be beating little safeties and nickelbacks. Like, he lined up outside 91% of the time last season. He was an outside receiver, a dominant force. And I did understand Tank Dell has a little bit of runway over Nico because he has 3 more years on his rookie deal than Nico did. And then Nico gets re-signed, and it's like, oh, does Tank Dell take a hit? And like you just pointed out, Dell balled out with Nico on the field, and Nico balled out with Dell on the field. Like, they're both set up to be free. Like, what's crazy is they have the exact same average for us too. Like, we have them vastly differently ranked, but they average out to being identical, which is really funny because I was a Nico holder and Dave's a Tank holder. So we had this little inner battle. The one counterpoint I'd say to Dell would be, one big argument you had against Devon A-Chain in the RB rankings was, it's really hard for me to move A-Chain into my top 10 because all I knew about him coming out of college was he was frail and small boy, and he got hurt a couple times last year, and so I can't put him that high. And then you go, but Tank Dell is a wide receiver 1, even though he's really small, frail, and got hurt last year and didn't finish out the year. So it's like, does it worry you at all that he's got hurt last season, or do you feel like that was a fluke, or is it a little bit of both maybe?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. I think that the irony, I'd say, like, the thing that I love, I'll put this way, the thing I loved about it, he got hurt blocking. And so
like, to me,
to me, that's like, the guy loves football. And it's like, and it was on a run play at the goal line. he got hurt block. I was watching it. That's all I remember it. And so to me, that was just kind of like a freak thing, but also something to me that speaks volumes about Tank Dell as a player. Like the dude just wants to play and is like a football guy. And so all of those things together, like, yeah, am I nervous about his size? Absolutely. Like there's no way not to be nervous about his size. For me, typically too, I usually start wide receiver with like, all right, 6 feet or not. If you're not, we're not interested. If you are, okay, let's evaluate the rest of you as a player. But yeah, I just got so hyped last year hearing about CJ Stroud, just loving the guy. So that's where I kind of dove deeper and fell in love with him as a prospect. I'd say the only person I want to talk about in this range too, I will actually say, to me, this tier doesn't feel good to me. Like, it feels like this should be broken up to 2 different people. Like, I would personally probably have more like Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Ayuk, T. Higgins, and then almost everyone else after that is a separate piece that they all could be wide receiver ones, but they're really wide receiver twos right now. Because no one's really proven it beyond it, especially with Rome. Like, Rome's not going to be a wide receicer 2 probably even this year.
Right. This is why the dynasty rankings come into play, where it's like Rome's still only 22. He's the only person that's less than a year older than him is London. So he just has such an age. He has such a time on his side if he does hit.
100%. I would say the only person that I had in this tier, in this big tier that you have here, not the segmented ones, but this person would have been in the Tank Dell, Rome, Drake London tier kind of thing, was Rashee Rice, which we've now downgraded me personally too, because of, we just don't know, like, A, how long is he suspended? B, is he going to make better decisions off the field? Is it going to be another Aaron Hernandez situation? I don't know. And so for me, I just want to preface that, like, he's still that good of a talent to me, but like, we need to
slippery slope, bud. Slippery slope.
We need to find some new friends. We need to get out of Texas. He should not go to the Texans or the Cowboys.
All my exes live in Texas, bro. Oh man, but you know what's funny is when we're talking about height and weight, is I pull up a chart here, which shows wide receiver from the NFL Combine correlation to fantasy production. And you would think of all of the NFL Combine stats you can do, which is the 40-yard dash, the vertical leap, the broad jump, 3-cone, shuttle, your speed score, all these scores you can get, the very highest correlation to fantasy production through your first 4 seasons is your height and weight. So it's so funny that, like, it's almost like the combine's fucking meaningless for receivers. It's like you said, I used to just look at if they're 6 feet or taller. You're onto something. That's literally the highest correlation of fantasy points, is if you're the tall and not skinny. But it's funny, we have, 4 tall, slender dudes in here or 3 with Devontae Smith, Tank Dell, and
short.
I guess they're the only, yeah. They're sleight of frame. But yeah, the other guys I want to talk about briefly that we didn't really touch on were Waddle, Higgins, and Nico, because they're all guys who are monsters in their own right, but are not necessarily the alpha of their team. And I think we kind of talked a little bit about when you talk about Jalen Waddle, and none of them are truly like young in a sense where you could say, oh, I'll buy them now, and then by the time they start getting their stride, they'll be the wide receiver 1. Like, you with Rome Odunze being 22, you buy Rome Odunze right now for 2 firsts and a 1 QB. And 2 years from now, when DJ Moore is out of his contract, or he's 30 years old and Keenan Allen's retired, Rome Odunze is the wide receiver 1 of the Bears. He's 24 years old. He's clicking with Caleb. Obviously, that could come sooner, but you have a horizon. Whereas like Waddle, Higgins, and Nico are guys you're betting on. What are you going to do for me now? But you also have target competition where you have some uncertainty every week around, are you going to be the guy this week? Because like you said, Dell balled out with Nico. Nico balled out with Dell, but they both had some down weeks when they both were on the field. And you got to hope, you hope Stroud keeps it up. And you mentioned it, Nico put up a season with more than 3 yards per route run, which has only been done like 8 times in the last 15 years, which is like Tyreek Hill 3 times, Hopkins a couple times, Julio Jones 1 time, like, and Nico. It's just a weird list because it's like, I love Nico. Dave's scorned by him because Dave drafted Nico and then dropped him. But like I had Nico everywhere last year, and RIP, I traded him away. But like I think he's a monster. Him getting the contract was validation to me. I really
why I
liked
picked
you.
him though, because it was height and his weight.
Yeah. Dave
Not
just loves
kidding.
big, thick boys.
I do.
But yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we move to the next tier?
No.
All right. I had one graphic I wanted to pull up. I have right here on the screen, I have a player A versus player B graphic.
Actually, real quick, the one thing I wanted to say, was there anyone else? I mentioned Rice. Was there anyone else that you have that you think should be in that tier that's not? Because the only person that I have that's close there would have been Pickens.
So the biggest gaps there for me and you were Jackson Smith and Jigba and George Pickens. And then Rashee Rice, I think maybe pre all the drama and then the ensuing NFL draft and free agent offseason where they really changed the landscape of the team. Maybe he's in that tier too. So we'll talk about them in the next. And cool. Tyreek Hill is pretty close. Tyreek Hill is like one average rank away. I could have put him in this tier, but I didn't. But before we get into that tier, I have an overlay here that I wanted you to look at. And this is, I pulled this together. We have on the player A is age 22 and a half. They're almost 23 years old. Played 17 games last year, put up 17 and a half points per game, over 100 receptions, almost 1,500 yards, 6 touchdowns. He had a missed tackles force per reception of 15%, a catch rate of 70%, yards per route run of 2.75, and a contested catch rate of 50%. Player on the right is almost 25, played 16 games last year, including playoffs, put up an 18.2 fantasy points per game, had 90 receptions, also over 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns, a bit longer ADOT at 11.4, forced missed tackles at a 24% clip, had a catch rate of 74%, put up a yards per route run over 3 at 3.17. You have obviously it's a comparison between two young receivers. It's more so to highlight how good these two guys had it last year. Do you have a preference? You probably already can figure out who some of the players are just because the stats stand out. But I thought it was a fun exercise to put together last year. And, I may have cheated a little bit on some of the player metrics to make some guys look better than the other, but.
So what's the question? Just like, is
there who would you prefer just looking at the raw stats?
I'd prefer A.
Yep. So player A is Puka Nacua. Player B is Nico Collins. So it's I pulled in Nico's playoff game as well because he had a monster playoff game. So I had to include it. Or his 2 playoff games. And he missed a couple games in the regular season. So I took those out of his stats and that elevated his stats. I think it just goes to show, obviously, 2 years of age difference. The other guy on the left is a rookie. The guy on the right was a third-year player. I thought it was a cool exercise in seeing, everyone goes, Puka had a monster year, and they go, Nico had just a regular. Nico put up such a historic season. It was just a cool graphic to see side by side. But
yeah, no, I think for me, and the reason why is because a little bit what you talked about too. You have if the league average is 7% touchdown percentage, right?
Yep.
And Nico was
10%.
Person B was 10. You have more receptions, more yards on A. For me, some of those things just looked better.
Yeah, I mean, yards 2 full years younger.
Well, that too, but yards after catch being a little bit better for B, fine. But you kind of expect that too when you're having the higher A dot. So yeah, I don't know. I think all those things combined, I just I liked A more.
Actually, believe it or not, the lower your A dot is, the higher your yak usually is, because you're usually catching the guys who catch the ball near the line of scrimmage. I usually have a bigger cushion, whereas the guys downfield, you'll see guys like George Pickens have a huge, really high A dot and a really low yak because they get tackled right away.
Fair point.
So it's actually a really strong signal if a guy has a high A dot and a high yak. It's actually a pretty strong signal that they're getting open downfield, because that the higher your yak is actually a separation stat more than it is a juke ability or juke rate stat. But all right, so moving on to this next tier. I think this is a fun tier to talk about. We have Tyreek Hill. Oh shit, what number are we at? We're at 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we have Tyreek Hill at our wide receiver 19. We had Jackson Smith and Jigba at wide receiver 20. We had Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver 21. We had Michael Pittman at wide receiver 22. Rashee Rice at wide receiver 23. George Pickens at wide receiver 20. Is he not on here? Oh, he is. George Pickens, wide receiver 24. Xavier Legette. Check out my new graphic. Wide receiver 25. And Ladarius McConkey at wide receiver 26. So this is a huge tier. There's a ton of, this is a really tough. Actually, this should have been tough to rank. Actually, you're right. We should have had like Waddle down here. We should have had Devontae down here. We should have had Higgins down here. We should have had Nico and Tank down here because they're all wide receiver 2s. And we should have moved all these guys to tough to rank. You'll do that right now, real quick. Just I think it's better for the graphic.
No, hold on. So who's coming down is Drake London.
All the guys who are wide receiver 2s on the team.
No. That's crazy. It should be Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, and Brandon Ayuk at the top. And then Rome, Nico, Tank, and Drake on the bottom. Drake hasn't even been a top 30 wide receiver. He can't be borderline wide receiver 1.
I can't. It's too complicated, so I'm just going to leave it the way we had it.
You just can't let Drake London not be in that tier.
Yeah, you're right. I proved why.
Okay,
so
you can put Xavier and Ladd in the tough to rank. There you go.
Yeah, I think these guys are all tough to rank.
And JSN.
Yeah, I think JSN's tough to rank. I think Rashee Rice, like we just proved, is tough to rank given his murky situation.
Fine.
So let's go with, I think, one that's actually, is there anything when you look at, you see these next eight guys are top 25, how they fill out in these next two tiers? Anyone that stands out is super interesting or not like the others? All these guys are under 25, under 24 years old, except for two.
Yeah, I mean, Tyreek at some point, even in Dynasty, to me, you still have to pay for excellence. And so, like Devontae 2 years ago, he'd still be in this tier, even if he was 29, because he was still wide receiver 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah. He was wide receiver 1 like 2 years in a row.
Yeah, just with Tyreek. So, or Cooper Kupp would have been this rank too if Cooper didn't have a down year last year. Cooper Kupp be right here. And so, I think it's interesting to think, like, is Tyreek going to drop a little bit, or that also for the other two, like Devontae and Kupp, are really interesting pieces to me. Like, can they have a couple other good years? I don't know. But yeah, Tyreek's he's projected right now wide receiver top 3 at least, probably.
Yeah,
in redraft.
I think our underdog drafts right now is CMC, Lamb, and then Tyreek.
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard. You can't have him too far away, even if it's only going to be a 1 year or two year rental. For the rest of the guys, I think the one that it's so funny because you have the 3 guys that have been around, and you have the 3 guys or 4 guys that are new. And for me, the 3 that have been around, Pittman, Pickens, and Rice, they all could go either way. They all could either flourish to be a top 12 wide receiver, and they all could stick in this 24 to 30 range. And so excited to see how they play out. I'm so bearish on JSN after his first season, but like, I mean, to me, he's just a middle. To me, he's I'm missing the word, but I didn't fuck it up. He's
it's the Jigba. Don't fuck it up.
To me, he's the middle class version of Quentin Johnson.
Oh my god! All right, chat, we're cutting that. Stop the show. Done.
Yeah, it's just like Quentin Johnson really devalued himself. I think JSN's right there, just like slightly above. So Quentin Johnson's the poor man's, and Jackson Smith and Jigma is the middle class Quentin Johnson. So that's him. And then Ladd, Brian Thomas, and Xavier, look at all of them could be wide receiver 1s again if they come on right and perform. But just as easily they could fall into what Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave have been for the last 3 years or 2 years. So that's where I'm at on them. What about you?
A lot here. It's hard, like you said. I just don't like playing Dynasty in a way. To me, so what I've learned now in my going into my 6th season playing, investing in 30-year-old receivers, it just isn't fun for me. Like I don't have fun rooting for a guy anymore. Once he's like hits a certain, it's just like because I know I can't get any more value out of him, no matter how good he does. It's just like to me, like I don't care what you tell him. Oh, you could just pay up now. Who cares about how sexy your team is? Just go try to win a ship. Like go fuck yourself, buddy. Like I like to play the game the way I like to play, and you like to play the way you like to play. I'm not playing to win money. I'm playing to have fun. And so it's like, of course, winning money is the ultimate goal. But like I want to build a team that's fun. And to me, paying the same price as Malik Neighbors to get Tyreek Hill is not fun. I'd rather have the chance at getting 10 years of the next Tyreek Hill.
There is
versus
no
1
way
year.
that's the same price.
Right now, I bet you, again, I don't even have it open. I bet Tyreek Hill and Malik Neighbors are like back to back on Keep Trade Cut right now, which is not the right price. It's just the general market crowdsourced
Keep
price.
Trade Cut is a redraft price, and it sucks. And you should never mention those words on this podcast.
Again, Keep Trade Cut does suck, but it's a very good pulse check for how the crowd is viewing values. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean you should value that way. It does not take your league economy into account. It's just a good like. Do people usually like my guy more than this guy or this guy more than that guy? Doesn't mean it's right. But it's a decent pulse check. So to me, I have no interest in Tyreek Hill. I know the Beavers came to me earlier this summer or this fall or spring, whatever season we're in. I'm almost done with my beer, so give me a break. And they were like, "Hey, what would you pay for Tyreek?" And I'm like, "I don't know, maybe a future first." And they're like, "All right, never mind." So I have no interest in Tyreek. I do have regarding JSN and Rashee Rice.
Note, it's wide receiver 9 versus wide receiver 14.
Okay, a lot different than I thought.
6,600 versus 5,700.
Damn, that's a lot of points. So I do think JSN had a very disappointing season. I'm obviously optimistic. I'm a JSN bag holder, and I think he was one of the most phenomenal college prospects we've ever seen. And he got thrust into a situation where he was
25.
Yeah, thrust into a situation where he's destined to fail, being behind 2 very good wide receivers, and then got hurt in training camp, which is like the death knell to rookies. If you don't get a chance to learn the playbook, learn how to run the routes, mesh with the team, mesh with the quarterback, you're basically starting behind the 8 ball to start. So he dealt with a broken hand all preseason, didn't get to play in the preseason games, just came out, but on a per route basis, didn't have a terrible season. He was pretty successful in the role he was assigned, which was for some reason to be a gadget player. And so I pulled together this graphic that I found, which was, and it's going to be tough to see, but it's a wide receiver success rate versus different scenarios among rookie wide receivers. So the receivers in the list are Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, JSN, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, Puka Nacua, Demario Douglas, Jordan Addison, and Tank Dell. And this Matt Harmon, if you're familiar with him, he runs Reception Perception. It's a wide receiver focused show or whatever website. And he charted out each player's success rate versus man, versus zone, and versus double. And for the sake of most rookies, I don't think double really matters unless you're lining up completely on the outside, which Tank Dell did. So actually that would be super important to succeed. But being successful versus man or versus zone, most importantly, is what he does when he charts this is he goes, I'm looking at these players independent of the actual outcome of the play. So it doesn't matter if they get a reception, if they get even a target, if they drop the ball. All that matters is were they successful on their route ran. And looking at this, the most successful receivers versus man were Josh Downs at north of 81%, Jaden Reed at second at 78.6%, Zay Flowers at 73%, and Puka, Demario Douglas, JSN, and Tank Dell all coming in around 70%. So, and then when you transition over to success rate versus zone, which is the predominant defensive scheme of the NFL right now, about 2/3 of NFL defensive plays are running zone. The most successful success rates, rookie success rates versus zone were Josh Downs again at 85%, Zay Flowers at 84%, and JSN at 80%. They're the only 3 receivers north of 80%. So to me, this just showed me, again, it's not the end all be all. It's not a JSN's a superstar. Yep, write him up. Like, JSN has a lot of hurdles to clear. He has to have so many things go his way to put up a very productive season this year, which gives me pause because you're not going to get if you pay 2 first for him, you're not going to get that back at the end of the year without an injury to DK and an injury to Lockett. But it shows me he's an NFL caliber receiver, and his lack of success was not because he stinks, but more so the scheme stunk, Geno stunk. He was winning his routes. He just wasn't getting the.
If you're not watching this, don't waste your time watching it. Just continue listening. But I just wanted to let you know, 3 of the 4 most productive people last year, Tank Dell, Jordan Addison, and Puka Nacua, are the lowest on this list versus zone. And Jordan Addison is the lowest against man. So maybe take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is that this is trying to highlight players that did well on their specific routes, not got the volume to necessarily be successful, which again, at the end of the day, this is a fantasy show. So getting the volume is the most important thing. So a guy like Addison, who got to play without JJ for half the year, and a guy like Puka, who actually got to be on the field for 600 plus routes last year, they're going to be the most successful. Tank Dell, who's on the field
how about Tank getting 100 zone attempts? That's crazy.
Yeah. It just goes to show that teams really respected CJ Stroud, because most teams run zone against quarterbacks who they cannot possibly defend otherwise, which is like Mahomes faces the most zone defenses in the league because they can't possibly defend everybody because he'll pick them apart in man. So it's interesting that he faced them. Again, also with volume comes less efficiency. So I'm not surprised to see that Tank Dell was slightly less efficient when he had to face almost twice as many zone schemes as the rest of the receivers on this list. But Tank Dell's a freak. It just, again, this is not the end all be all. I have another, I can't find it, but Matt Harmon charted out JSN's success rate by route run. And it was like, he's good at winning all the routes that the money making routes, which are the dig, the post, the flag. He just wasn't getting the target. It was just a very weird, unfortunate situation for him. I think he belongs in that. If you're a rebuilder and you want to go get somebody that you think could appreciate in value, and you can get JSN for wide receiver 25 prices, that's the guy you want to go get in this tier. He's not the guy you're going to go get to score you points this year, though. Of this tier, I would actually put him, ahead of Xavier Legette, because I'm sorry, I just don't believe in Xavier Legette or Bryce Young. But other than that, I'd put all the rest of the receivers in this tier ahead of him for the season, for the sheer fact they all have either better opportunity or better quarterbacks. But yeah, that was a lot. So the other person you talked about is Rashee Rice. I think this is a good one to talk about because you're not the only one who's concerned about Rashee Rice out there. He put up a phenomenal tail end to his rookie year, very similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown's tail end of his rookie season. But like you've already mentioned, he went out there. He, got put in time out a little bit, cargo room. And then the Chiefs followed that up after he got into legal trouble by signing Hollywood Brown and then drafting Xavier Worthy in the first. They haven't drafted a wide receiver in the first round since like Sammy Watkins or something. I don't even know when the last time they drafted somebody in the first round was, but it was I don't remember it. So it was a long time ago. And so to me, that his situation went from, again, say what you want, he ran basically the same exact route tree as JSN last year. He just had a way better quarterback and a way better yards after the catch. He didn't do anything better than JSN as far as route running was concerned. So it's very similar route tree. And now he has 2 very, very good receivers in his receiver room, along with Travis Kelce being there. How do we rank Rashee Rice? Because I think if we just went to this offseason and nothing else changed with Kansas City or him, I think we move Rashee Rice into this tier pretty easily. I think I'd have him somewhere in this range. I don't know where it would be, but I think it'd be very easy to have him up in this range right now. But with his current situation, it's really hard for me to put him up there. And what do you think about him going forward? I know you've kind of already talked about him, but what do you think about the additions they made to that receiver room? Or, do you feel like that's a big threat to him, or do you think that could put him in jeopardy? Are you worried at all they might just cut him and say, we're not dealing with this shit?
I'm not worried if they cut him, because if they did, I think he'd get picked up pretty quickly. Look at who was the guy that ended up on the Browns for all the weed stuff? That was amazing.
Josh Gordon.
So, look at Josh Gordon, how many chances he got for weed. And, this guy's just doing dumb shit, hitting someone in the club, a la Tyreek Hill. crashing cars, just stupid. So like, yeah, it's decision making in crowd, but he's not quite to Aaron Hernandez level, and he's not like
Yeah, I fucking hope
consistently
not.
breaking league rules like Josh Gordon. But yeah, I think he's in that realm of like, he's a great player shown it 1 year. If he say he even gets a 6-game suspension, he comes back and he's a dud, then yeah, maybe he doesn't. Then I'm getting a little worried because now he's not performing in Kansas City. And then if he doesn't perform well there, does that mean other teams aren't going to pick him up like last Sky Moore? But I don't know. Like I'm not that worried right now because I think him and Xavier Worthy are just such different players. Like Xavier Worthy is going to blow the top off. He's going to find the soft spot in the zone and catch passes. Hollywood Brown, I think, is also going to be another deep threat. But
yeah,
I'm not super worried. I think I'm actually still pretty optimistic. It's just more the question of like, are they going to be able to make sure they can get the guy to change and not keep going back to Texas?
I got you. All right. We're coming up on it. Is there anybody else in this tier? I mean, this is going to be the last bit. So, we have Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, Xavier Legette, 3 more rookies in this tier. We didn't really talk much about Pittman or Pickens. Is there anybody else you want to talk a little bit about that you had in here? Because I know I didn't have Legette ranked in my top 50, and you have him in your top 25. So that seems like one that might be worth talking about.
I think Legette is the one that I threw in there because the interesting thing is who was the best rookie wide receiver last year?
Puka.
One of the oldest ones too. And so everyone talks about Legette, oh, he's old, it's this and that. He just came on. Like, am I a little worried about his last season? Yes, but his last season was so freaking elite. It's hard to argue against it.
It's true.
And just looking at the guy, like I said it before on the pre-show, like he's kind of like a birthing between Devontae Adams, which is my guy, I just traded away. Like I've had Devontae through all the seasons so far. He's a cross between him and DK Metcalf. Well, guess what? I also drafted DK Metcalf out the gate too. So I had DK and Devontae in my team.
You're familiar with these guys.
I just now birthed Xavier Legette. And the other thing too, actually, an irony here, I also birthed Luke McCaffrey, and I've had Christian McCaffrey for the last 2-3 seasons. So
you had him 1 year. Don't you dare. I had McCaffrey for 2 years before you.
I know, I'm just kidding. I had him 1 year. It was a great year.
It was a great year. It was the best year of my life.
But yeah, I think for me, he's going to a situation where, so some of the things that I did statistically, I don't have a chart. Sorry for the viewers out there.
Should have sent to me.
But I did a bunch of analysis just going through first round draft picks of QBs. And other than one time, has the 1-1 not been like a consistent QB in the NFL? And so to me, with a new coaching staff, I'm letting that Bryce Young's going to get better. Xavier Legette's their guy they went and got, and he is
Trade up for him.
He's arguably going to be their wide receiver 1. I can't imagine it being Thielen. And so
Deontay Johnson, bro.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson is from a Pickens guy. It's a frustrating thing to see Deontay Johnson go there now with Legette there. So I mean, who knows? Maybe he still gets 100 catches. I hope fucking not. But my hope is that Bryce Young leans on the Xavier Legette and doesn't lean on Deontay Johnson. It could still be Johnson for a couple more years until he fucks off. But for me, the Xavier Legette is just such a phenomenal athlete that I think he really wants to perform and has like kind of grinded his craft to get as good as he has. It, to me, it feels like the Puka story, where it's like Puka was kind of always had these injury issues, but showed really good promise. Xavier Legette like finally came on in kind of his last season and outperformed always against these little boys. Now he's playing against men. I don't know if he can still do it, but I really do think that for me, again, if you're drafting size and you're drafting athleticism, there really wasn't a better person to pick this year than Xavier Legette. And so for me, I'm really excited about what he could potentially become. But for sure, I don't think anyone's going to have him 25. I think most people are going to probably have him closer to 30, 35, maybe even closer to the 40 range. And I think out of the top 50 is a little tough, but because again, he's going in as wide receiver 1. Like half the people on this list, like Roma Dunze is going to be wide receiver 3 on the depth chart day 1. I mean, he could become wide receiver 1 by the end of the season, but I don't think people are projecting that right away. So, yeah, I think I'm excited about him. and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think to me why I would like Xavier Legette so much is that he's just such a likable guy.
Well, hold on. Actually, you know what? It would be a question too. I know Josh Allen's Josh Allen, but like, I wonder how far different they're actually going to finish between Xavier Legette and Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman has more competition with Kincaid and just Kincaid, really. And actually, and their running back, who's pretty good.
James Cook.
James Cook, thank you. So with Kincaid and Cook, that he has a little bit of competition. Like there's no competition in Carolina. It's Xavier Legette and I guess Deontay Johnson. And so I wonder where, and both those guys are kind of viewed like big fucking wide receivers. Just wonder how they're going to perform against each other.
Yeah, I again, you already kind of touched on a lot of it, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but my big worry about him is just the fact that he did nothing in college until he was 23, and it's like, not to discount that, it's just he had a great like a record-setting season, but he still did it when he was older than everybody else in the league at the time. So I can't get behind Legette yet. He's somebody that I think was going to have to prove it to me. I don't think I really have anything else to say about anybody on here. I think we've kind of talked about these guys in one form or another. I think Pittman has been a quiet alpha for most of his career, but he's what you see is what you get. I don't think you're going to get a top 12 season, probably not even, maybe top 15 in that 10 to 15 range. Might be his ceiling outcome. Same with Pickens. Like I just think he's saddled with shitty QB play. I can't really see him putting up, even with being the alpha, I can't see him putting up a top 10 season. Like, of course he's going to have top 10 weeks, but and then Brian Thomas and Lab McConkey, I think, are in the same bucket as those other guys because they have way better QB situations than Pittman, Pickens, Legette, and they have way less target competition than JSN, Rashee Rice. Like, they just have the chance to become the next T. Higgins, the next, Jalen Waddle, the next Chris Olave. They have the opportunity to do that. So that's why I kind of have those two guys in my top 20. I know Lab McConkey scored really well in a lot of underlying per route metrics. He didn't really play a lot. I think he got hurt a little bit his senior year or junior year, whenever he got drafted. But he just had a really good combine. He was super athletic, and he's really good. He wasn't the best player on that. Obviously, Brock Bowers literally was the engine that could for that team. But Lab McConkey's he's got a cool name. I mean, how do you not draft a guy with a cool name? But all right, Dave, is there anybody else you think that of the little bucket down here that we missed and that maybe we should have had in our top 24? I see a few names in here that I feel like Zay Flowers probably could make his way in here.
Actually, who's the interesting one to me is Christian Kirk.
Christian Kirk is probably the least interesting one in this entire list here. So
2 years ago, he was wide receiver 12.
Yeah, it's fucking good for you, bro.
Yeah, how did Calvin Ridley doesn't? I mean,
again, he on a per game basis last year, he was actually still a top 15 receiver. He just got hurt and missed 4 or 5 games. So
Christian Kirk is someone that it's hard to not.
Yeah, but he's like 29. Like, what a fucking loser.
Is he 29? He's not fucking 29.
I don't know. He's 27 and a half. He's
really?
certainly not a spry young.
Oh yeah, he's
chicken.
a little. Yeah. Okay. Fair.
So I'm gonna take him out of there. But no, I think he's one of the probably the most undervalued receivers in all of Dynasty and redraft. You probably get him in like the 6th or 7th round in redraft, which is a theft. Flowers is probably one we overlooked. I don't know how neither of us had him in our top 25. I feel like he has the opportunity to be the wide receiver 1 for Lamar Jackson, which is not a great role because the Ravens are the other team, along with the Falcons, who have thrown probably around less than 500 times a year the last couple of years. DK Metcalf is one who we talked a little bit. I think he probably deserves some recognition for being an athletic freak. But again, having Geno Smith as your QB and having JSN in the same room as you is a huge indictment. Like, Jason's a freak. DJ Moore probably belongs in the conversation up here. You got some old heads who probably belong. You got like Cooper Kupp probably belongs to be talked about. He's been
I think DJ Moore is terrible.
Okay. Amari Cooper, like just guys who are good Stephon Diggs, very good, but like they're all old now, so it's like hard to put them up. Devontae belongs in.
No, Devontae's there. I mean, Amari's up there. I think Cup right now. You got to see it happen.
Right.
Cooper is kind of in there a little bit. Devontae is. Stephon
Jordan
Diggs,
Addison.
Jordan Addison deserves to be in there for sure.
Right. So like this is really hard, guys. We did our best. Let us know who we missed out on. Let us know what we nailed. Let me know how much better my rankings were than Dave's. And then like and subscribe and leave a good comment and a 5-star review. And
you better post a link. Joe will post a link to our Excel doc so you can see all the rankings.
Will do. All right. See you guys. See you, Dave.
Yeah.